Nova Scotia had housing shortages before these wildfires, and many more people will be confronting them now. Our next guest, though, is concerned about both the immediate and future impact of the fires on homelessness. Harold Cook's an outreach nurse with MOSH, the Mobile Outreach Street Health Team in Halifax. Morning, Harold. Welcome back to Information Morning.
Good morning, Portia.
There's a lot of focus on the upheaval that people are going through, a lot of focus on the fires and supporting people now. Why do you worry about maybe the long term?
My main concern would mostly stem from the fact that, with MOSH, the organization that I work with, we try to approach our care for our clients always from the perspective of trauma-informed care. So we're always very aware of the fact that a lot of our clients have experienced some sort of trauma in their past, which often sort of leads to them being in a situation where they are either homeless or street involved. They often have issues with mental health, addictions, and that sort of thing. So my concern, in this situation is we all of a sudden have 150 families who have experienced a very significant trauma. And so my concern is obviously around the support that these families are receiving. A primary concern would be, there's a lot of younger individuals in these families. So we're talking about school-aged kids, teenagers, etc. And I would just hope that this is not the traumatic event that leads to issues down the road.
And what kinds of situations might they be in when a family life is disrupted in this way? A displacement in their home life, instability, not being connected to school and supports.
So this would be like a very vulnerable time for these individuals. They've lost the security that comes from having a home, having a space where they feel safe. When we talk about trauma, the obvious traumas are often like physical in nature, sexual abuse, physical, mental abuse, that sort of thing. But the loss of a home, of a safe space, is very much a traumatic experience. And Nova Scotians are famous for this, for supporting folks in these times of need. The response over these last few days has been tremendous to see. But there's going to need to be more, and this is going to have to be long term for a lot of these individuals. Just support where they can reach out to speak to, whether it be a psychologist, counselor, social worker, that kind of thing, about how they're feeling, and just to be able to sort of process what's gone on and what the long term implications are.
And I suppose, depending on what's going on with the family, there might be some behavior out of the stress that could trickle down to the kids too.
Yeah, children, teenagers, they can sense when their family's in turmoil. They can sense when things aren't quite right. If they have any pre-existing mental health issues, this could certainly be something that could trigger, additional issues. So everybody who's sort of surrounding these families should be approaching these situations with just that understanding. So I'm talking about everybody from friends and family, but also employers, just understanding that this is a significant situation that they're dealing with, and they're going to need a lot of time. They're going to need a lot of support to work their way through it.
So for employers, what's your advice around support that goes beyond, take a few days to get your life together, or maybe use your sick days or that kind of thing? What might be more useful?
I would hope it would just be something more substantial than that, like just an understanding that these people are going to, possibly need more than just your traditional sick days. If there's any sense of understanding in an employer, they should recognize that this is a significant situation, and the support's going to need to be, rather than just take a couple of days if you need it. It's going to need to be more than that, because coupling this traumatic event with, let's say, somebody is needing to use more sick time, and the employer starts to get upset, and it leads to a job loss. Then we're talking about, a recipe for disaster where somebody now is without a home and without a job, and, that can spiral to the the spaces where with my organization we see all the time where people are homeless and absolutely scrambling and their lives go from fairly stable to quite chaotic very quickly.
Yeah, Harold, I'm sure you see that immediately and viscerally all the time in the work that you do. And you're saying you hear from people when you get to know them better who are experiencing homelessness that there have been these significant kind of events where, one thing, a fire, a displacement, some instability, cascades or dominoes into other things depending on, what happens after that or around that.
Yeah, that's right. It's becoming more and more obvious as we see more homelessness in mostly in HRM, but in the more rural parts of the province as well. It's a very marked trend. It's very much a pattern that a lot of these folks, as you kind of speak to them and you get their stories as to how things got to where they are. There's almost inevitably going to be that initial event in the past that just never really got processed properly, never really got dealt with properly, and it just sort of works its way down the road to the point where they're really struggling.
And I would assume now that we're in this situation in Halifax with such a housing shortage, there's a even slimmer line between an event like this and then being in that precarious kind of a situation.
Yeah, it's a difficult time for the province on so many levels. We're talking about a housing crisis on top of just absolutely insane inflation, where just the very basic necessities of life are costing way more than they ever have before. And you put those together with a big event like this, and we've had a few of them in the past few years. It starts to take a toll on your average Nova Scotian. We're talking about HRM specifically here, but we also know that rural Nova Scotia is being impacted heavily by the wildfires right now down Barrington Way. And we also know that they don't have access to the same services as folks who are in the HRM. So just being mindful that, it's not just folks that are near the city that are being impacted and are going to need support. It's also our neighbors that live in more rural areas as well.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I appreciate your thoughts, Harold, and your insight. Thanks for giving us your time.
Anytime. Take care.
That's Harold Cook, a public health nurse with MOSH, or an outreach nurse. That's with the Mobile Outreach Street Health Team based in Halifax.